There she is.
Yeah,
I love it. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Before I go into it, I was going into some statistics on incarceration in this country and just criminal justice and how we really do need reform. So before we get into your story, I just want to walk through just a couple of key statistics. As I stated before, the United States incarcerates its citizens more than any other country in this world. Those mass incarcerations disproportionately affect African Americans, other people of color, and also low income citizens in this country. Let's go through. The US has 5% of the world's population, but nearly 25% of its incarcerated population. From 1980 to 2017, the number of women in jails and prisons in the US grew 750%, and over 225,000 women are incarcerated today. This is unacceptable. This is why there needs to be reform in our criminal justice system. And this is why I am beyond elated to have Ms. Kemba Smith Pradia here, an author, a public speaker, a criminal justice reform consultant, and she is the founder of the Kemba Smith Foundation. Kemba, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Really appreciate the invite.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to go right into it because you have
Yeah.
so much story, and I don't even want to give any of you can just go into your background and just talk about being incarcerated and where you are today.
Well, it's interesting you read the statistics, and I was fortunate in the fact that back in the 90s, I was sentenced to 24 and a half years as a first-time nonviolent drug offender. And when I say fortunate, I was fortunate in the fact that there was a tremendous amount of support around my case and my story, because after I was sentenced to 24 and a half years as a first-time nonviolent drug offender, even though the prosecutor said I never handled, used, or sold any of the drugs that were involved, I ended up getting sentenced to longer than I had actually been living on this earth. And I also had turned myself in 7 months pregnant. So I gave birth to my first child. And so hearing those statistics, it's still troubling to me today, even almost being out 20 years. December, it'll be 20 years. But for me, once I went inside the system and saw the reality of what was going on, I was behind a prison wall where I felt like my life didn't matter, And so in coming out, it was a national movement. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund ended up taking on my case pro bono after the media, and the first media outlet was Emerge magazine, and the publisher was George Curry, where he highlighted my story, where my high school graduation picture was on the front page of this magazine. And so the Black community was outraged and was able to get the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to take on my case. But it wasn't because they felt sorry for poor little me. And, I was my parents' only child. I went to college at Hampton University, got caught up with a drug dealer, which led to this relationship that led to this prison sentence. But it was because the fastest growing population at the time were Black women. And so Elaine Jones, who was director of the organization at the time, she was from Virginia, law school graduate from UVA, and she said she was going to do whatever she needed to do to bring her homegirl home. And so that's what she committed to. And it was a long process, but back then in the 90s, somebody getting sentenced to 24 and a half years, there was a lot of brothers and sisters getting sentenced to life sentences. They were handing out life sentences like it was candy for drug offenses, because I did have a crack cocaine offense. And so it was a modern day miracle for me to even, get my sentence commuted by the President of the United States. And so there's a lot that I want to share, but in hearing those statistics, the reason why I'm still committed to this movement is because I couldn't walk away from what I had seen, what my spirit, my soul had felt with seeing so many people of color in the federal prison system that to me deserves a second chance. And I'm grateful for my second chance. And so after being out, it was important for me to be a part of this movement. And that's what I've been committed to since my release. And when I walked out of federal prison, it was announced that I had gotten my sentence commuted by President Clinton. The prison officials hadn't even told me yet. And the first person that told me was my friend Michelle West. And I was released in 2000. She
Hmm.
started her prison sentence in 93. And she is still sitting in federal prison serving a double life sentence plus 50 years. And so to know that I have sisters like that are still
Yeah.
in prison, it's important for me to continue to be that human face to help continue the movement. So that's why I've been so passionate with continuing to share the story.
And you've been featured on TV One's For My Man in 2019 and BET Bing. Talk about Just Leadership USA and the Justice Roundtable, why that's so important in some of the work that you're doing right now.
Well, in coming out and putting together the pieces of my life, um, one of the things that isn't addressed is like the trauma, because what led to my incarceration was because I was in an unhealthy relationship and I made certain choices and decisions. It was an abusive relationship. And
Okay.
so there was trauma with that. But then when I went into the prison system, there was also trauma. And so coming out, I was grateful to have the support. Like, I had an attorney offer me a job. I went back to college, but there was still this brokenness that I really couldn't share with, I did try to share, but I couldn't really connect with people in figuring out who Kemba was today and building myself up. And so it was in 2019 where I applied to be a part of Just Leadership USA. And basically, it's a community of formerly incarcerated individuals. And I encourage anyone to please take a look, because if you go on their website, which is jusa.org.
Okay.
And I feel like that is not right, but hold on. It's jlusa.org.
Okay.
And if you click on leadership, connect with our leaders, you will see an array of formerly incarcerated people that are leading criminal justice reform work across the country. So, we're in a different climate. When I came out in 2000, criminal justice was not the big thing to talk about, but
Right.
it was important for me to get in the mix with other criminal justice leaders across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, our objective is to try to end mass incarceration. And in having these leadership trainings, which people can find more information about, is to build us up so that we can be a part of the solutions and have seats at the table where we can actually make a change. Because oftentimes when people are talking about policy reform or reentry, they don't even think to include a person that's been incarcerated. So they need to go to the source to understand what needs to be fixed. And so it's just important for that community to be involved and to have a seat at the table to make a difference. So Just Leadership is a community that I've been able to really communicate with. And there's another organization, the Justice Roundtable, where people can go onto their site, which is justiceroundtable.org. And basically some of the organizations and partners that they have, fortunately, after I came out of prison, I was able to connect with some of those same organizations and continue to do the work. And so they have quarterly meetings where people can get information in different working groups. So I just strongly encourage people to go onto their sites, get information, especially if you have a loved one that's incarcerated. With this COVID pandemic, they have information on their websites that can tell you certain things that you can do to be involved, things that are happening like now. So you want to make sure you log in.
And you have voting rights, correct?
I do have my voting rights, but it was something that, when you talk about Black Lives Matter and how hard our ancestors fought in order for us to have this basic fundamental human right. When I was released from prison after serving 6.5 years, I was not able to vote. And in the state of Virginia, Virginia used to be one of the 4 states that permanently disenfranchises individuals unless they apply to get their rights restored. And so I actually had to go through, if I was trying to get a mortgage or get into an Ivy League university, and submitting certain documents and get certain letters to kind of back the fact that I was rehabilitated and reformed in order to get my rights restored. And I really had kind of blocked it out as far as in when President Obama's first election was in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
That's correct.
Um, I'm getting older, my time gets off, but I wasn't able to vote. And
Mm.
so for me, I was mad. It was just an array of emotions and also just feeling sad because I felt like, why am I sitting here feeling like I'm less than human
Mm.
and I can't go actively participate in something that should be a basic human fundamental right. And
Great.
so I did get my rights restored in 2012. I had the opportunity to work with the NAACP National with felony disenfranchisement initiative that they had. And basically, we traveled to Geneva, Switzerland
Okay.
to speak before the United Nations about voter suppression laws in the US. And so, for me, I take voting very seriously, and we have a dilemma in our nation right now. And so one of the things that I hope that everyone recognizes, and I, heard Stephanie in a previous episode that you had, the importance of us making sure that we take every initiative to make sure that we have numbers at the polls and understand just how important that is. But in also talking about voting rights, please make sure you complete that census. Because one of the things too, when I was in federal prison, I didn't understand being locked down in Danbury, Connecticut, and having to fill out this census form. But what I did understand later, hindsight, and doing the work that I'm doing, is that they wanted to count me in that small, rural city where funding will go for those people that are incarcerated in these rural cities when they need to be going into where people are from. And so I hope that everyone will take the time out to fill out that census and make sure that you go out to vote as well.
And I wanted to speak about voting rights only because I think some individuals, when they come out of prison, they may not know that they have the right to vote again. There are only 4 states, I believe, that you're permanently banned from voting. So I just think that's super critical, as we enter into a very, very important election coming in November. So that's why I wanted to ask that.
Yes.
Uh, so talk to me about the Kemba Smith Foundation and the work you're doing there.
Well, my foundation was incorporated when I was incarcerated, and the people that I need to make sure I mention today are my parents. Throughout my whole journey, my parents have been my heroes, and so they would come and visit me in prison, and they would see the other women, and they would be distraught, and they wanted to fight to help to bring me home. And so we created this foundation, and they started doing college tours across the country. And that's where the foundation basically got started. And since then, I've partnered with various different organizations, and it focused more on mentoring. There's an organization called National Alliance of Faith and Justice. And
Okay.
basically, it's a curriculum called What's Love Got to Do with It, that's centered around my story in my book. And so we've been able to initiate this program all across the country. But my take is that not only do I want policy reform, but I've also been committed to share my story, because I don't feel as if each and every young person has to make each and every mistake there is to make in life, that they can hear another person's story and make a determination that they don't want to go down that same path. So it's been important through my foundation to educate young people about the traps that you can get caught up in particular women and toxic relationships. But also too, one of the things that I wanted to make sure I mentioned as well, with regard to women and girls, incarceration and reentry. I mean, one of the things that I think was unfortunate with my situation, and I mentioned it earlier, is that no one at my sentencing took into consideration of the fact that I was in an abusive relationship and the trauma that women and girls experience. And so there is a different dynamic to women and being incarcerated. And my crime wasn't that I was criminally minded. It was the fact that I got into a wrong relationship. So as far as rehabilitation and programming, the programs that women have in prison are very limited. And so in coming out and reentry, I feel that there needs to be more programming and assistance for women, in particular, also Black women, coming out of prison, and make sure that there's gender responsive programming to the needs of our population. And so, you know, I have friends, Andrea James, she does a lot with women and incarceration, but also Susan Burton, Topeka Sam. They have actually reentry programs where they have taken the lead to provide housing and all different type of programs that can be beneficial to people coming home. And so with my foundation, I'm in the process, actually, I'm being transparent here, and building my board, and also having more centered programming and looking out for funding opportunities for my foundation as well. And so also too, this is, you know, my book poster child, and, you know, never in a million years would I thought that I would be so transparent about my story. But if anyone has a young person that they're, you know, struggling with, or a college student that you want to prepare for, you know, certain things, it's a cautionary tale, and true to life. So I strongly encourage that if you're interested in getting the book and hear more about what actually occurred with my story and incarceration and how I got caught up, please feel free to read it.
Kemba, I wanted to bring up the book. You took
okay.
No. That's all you. But since you've mentioned the book, can you talk about the movie deal that you have with BET?
Yes. It's been a long time coming. I mean, I have dealt with different movie producers. You know, initially when I came home, John Singleton was interested in my story, and I've worked with other producers, but MPI, and they're working with BET, where we're in the process of, you know, moving things forward. So I'm really, really excited about that and where God takes it. But you know, I've been on the public speaking circuit for, you know, just as long as I've been home, and even beforehand, because I can remember, you know, a friend from New York bringing kids into the prison for me to talk to while I was incarcerated. But it's been a long time coming, and I want the story to tell itself. I want it to go out to the masses, and I want people, and it's interesting that you have this superhero shirt on, but I really think, you know, so many people will read a story like mine and be like, wow, you know, you're so strong, how did you overcome? And I don't think individuals realize just how resilient you can be as a person, in particular us Black people, and what our people have endured back in the day. And that history and knowledge is what kept me strong through my ordeal and helped me minimize my own individual situation to look at the bigger picture, and honestly help me understand my responsibility and what it is that I'm doing today.
Absolutely. You know, in thinking about recent events, there was a young girl, and I mentioned it when we tried to do the live a couple minutes prior. Young girl named Grace, they haven't given her full name, lived in suburban Detroit, and she was sent to juvenile detention because she didn't complete her online homework properly.
I saw that.
And you know, she may have had some issues with her mother. But when I think about this 15-year-old Black girl who's being sent to juvenile detention for something that I've done, that everybody in the world has done, which is not do their homework, you know, correctly at some point. What can we do, you know, to avoid these types of stories? What kind of actions can we take when we're talking about criminal reform and wanting to volunteer, wanting to be a part of organizations? I know you talked about Just Leadership USA and the Justice Roundtable. Is there anything else you could recommend that people can do, that I can do, that anyone?
Just the importance. I mean, what you're doing right now is great, but in this COVID arena, we have to do things differently. And so before COVID, there were criminal justice roundtables or town halls in different countries. But going back to voting, I mean, we need to make sure that we have forums where we invite these people that are the gatekeepers to the criminal justice system and have them on, you know, under a light interrogation to find out what is their mentality. Yep. With how severe or not severe that they think that they should be with regard to certain policies, and picking their brains and making sure that we don't have, you know, people that don't have our best interests at heart, you know. And, you know, I know there's so many people out there that are just like, you know, and I don't really want to go, you know, too political, but voting is so important, you know. Like, I don't understand. You may feel like, you know, it doesn't affect you, or, you know, we're voting for two old white guys, but you need to understand that these are the people that's creating policies that are going to impact you in one form, shape, or another. Right. They will. So we need to make sure that we highlight these individuals and know what their mentalities are, and push the envelope in making sure that they understand this is what we want. And in order for you to hold an elected office, you need to make sure that you're representing our best interests.
Absolutely. Well, Kemba, on that note, I'm going to take something you said a couple of minutes ago. Yes, I'm wearing a superhero shirt, but you are absolutely the hero. I can't wait to actually read your book, because we're ordering it, a few of us at Live Nation Urban. Just so you know, Live Nation Urban is a supporter of what you do and who you are, and whatever you need from us, we are a resource for you. So thank you so much.
And last but not least, I just want to give God the glory
all the time.
The fact that, and I'm not here in this capacity, but anybody that's listening, understand that sometimes you go through things. And 94, when I went in the system, I didn't know what was going on. I felt like my world was crashing, but I'm not trying to turn this into church, but I have trusted God through this journey. Some of the time, a very painful journey, but never in a million years would I thought that he would put me in a position, because not only am I a public speaker, consultant, and, you know, doing all these things, but God has put me in a position to wear a new hat, which is actually Governor Northam appointed me to the Virginia Parole Board towards the end of 2019. So I actually have a vote on whether or not a person will be released from prison earlier than what it's intended for them. So that's something that I don't take lightly. So I just share that as a token of inspiration to others. And God is no respecter of persons. What he's done for me, he can do for you as well. So just please hold on. And thank you again, Brandon, for this opportunity.
Nah, thank you. Thank you. A friend of mine who's in education, she quoted and said, you know, my life is nothing but a series of miracles. And when I hear stories of, you know, like yours and others, and even my day-to-day, it's nothing but miracles every day. And so I'm thankful that you found time for us today, and really appreciative, to have you here.
You're welcome, Brandon. Thank you.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of The Souls of Black Folk. My name has been Brandon Pankey, and we'll be back next week, and we're going to be talking about mental health next week. Thank you again to Kemba Smith. Buy her book. Look out for her on BET. Phenomenal woman, phenomenal story, and it's just going to keep getting better. So thank you, Kemba, for being here.
You're welcome. Take care, Brandon. Be safe out there.
Likewise. Take care.
You too.